The locksmith's van backed out of the driveway on Willow Creek Lane at 4:47 p.m., just as her car turned the corner into the cul-de-sac. She sat frozen at the wheel, watching the front door of the house she thought was still hers. Bags sat stacked on the porch, zipped and labeled in handwriting that wasn't her own. A man stood on the steps, calm, arms crossed, holding a manila folder instead of a suitcase. He didn't look angry. He didn't look sad. He simply waited. 6 months earlier, in a hospital room 2 miles away, she had whispered 4 words that started all of this. Daniel Whitfield had married Rebecca Hayes 8 years earlier in a small ceremony behind her parents' church in Concord, North Carolina. He worked long hours as a general contractor, building custom decks and remodeling kitchens across Mecklenburg County, saving every spare dollar toward the mortgage on their 3-bedroom house near Charlotte. Rebecca worked as a labor and delivery nurse at Novant Health, proud of her career, restless in her marriage. Friends called them solid. Family called them the responsible ones. But underneath the routine of grocery runs and Sunday dinners, something had quietly shifted, and Daniel, focused on providing, hadn't noticed the distance growing. The distance had a name: Jason Reyes, a sales rep Rebecca met through a hospital wellness vendor 2 years into their marriage. It started as coffee after long shifts, then late-night texts Daniel assumed were co-workers venting about patients. Rebecca grew short with him at home, dismissive of his tired hands and sawdust-covered boots. "You're always working," she'd snap, though his overtime paid for her lease on a new SUV. Daniel tried counseling once. She canceled the second session, calling it pointless. He set one boundary, gently but firmly: "If you're unhappy, tell me, don't disappear instead." She promised she would. She didn't. When Rebecca announced she was pregnant, Daniel wept with joy on their front porch, certain a child would knit them back together. He repainted the nursery himself, sea glass green, assembled the crib twice to get it right, and taped ultrasound photos to the refrigerator door. Rebecca grew quieter as her belly grew rounder, her phone always face down on the counter. Daniel noticed but told himself it was hormones, exhaustion, nerves about motherhood. His mother, Carol, visiting from Asheville, wasn't convinced. "That girl's mind is somewhere else, Danny," she warned over sweet tea. Daniel defended his wife instinctively, wanting to believe in the family he was building. Labor started on a Tuesday night in March, 3 weeks early, at Novant Health's Presbyterian Medical Center downtown. Daniel held Rebecca's hand through 11 hours of contractions, exhausted but electric with anticipation. When their daughter, Grace, finally arrived, the room filled with nurses' congratulations and the thin, furious cry of a newborn. Daniel cradled his daughter against his chest, tears in his eyes, whispering her name for the first time. Rebecca watched him from the bed, pale and strangely still. Then, in a voice barely above breath, she said the 4 words that would end their marriage before it truly began. "I'm in love with another man now." Daniel didn't flinch. He didn't cry, didn't raise his voice, didn't even look up right away, because 3 weeks earlier, cleaning out the garage for the nursery overflow, he'd found a receipt for a hotel on South Boulevard tucked inside Rebecca's old gym bag. He'd said nothing then, choosing instead to quietly forward their joint bank statements to his personal email and photograph the receipt with his phone. Holding his newborn daughter, he finally understood why. "Okay," he said softly, kissing Grace's forehead. Rebecca blinked, unsettled by his calm. She had expected rage. She got silence instead. Daniel didn't confront her in the hospital room. He wouldn't give Jason Reyes the satisfaction of a scene. Instead, he drove home that night, sat at the kitchen table with his mother on speakerphone, and called a divorce attorney recommended by a client. He printed the hotel receipt, the bank transfers to an unfamiliar account, and message logs Rebecca had forgotten were backed up to their shared family iCloud. His mother, Carol, drove down from Asheville within 2 days, not to comfort him, but to help him pack Grace's nursery items into her own guest room, quietly, carefully, without a word to Rebecca. 2 weeks after bringing Grace home, Rebecca moved into Jason's apartment near South End, insisting it was just space to think. Daniel didn't argue. He simply changed the beneficiary on his life insurance, transferred Grace's name onto a savings account he'd secretly opened at First Citizens Bank, and filed paperwork citing adultery under North Carolina law, which, unlike many states, could affect alimony. He kept every receipt, every printed text, every hotel key card Rebecca had carelessly left in her coat pocket. He wasn't building a case out of anger. He was building it out of arithmetic, protecting the one person who couldn't yet protect herself. Rebecca returned 3 weeks later, expecting forgiveness, expecting the house, expecting Daniel's predictable patience to still be waiting like it always had. Instead, she found moving boxes in the garage, a court date already scheduled at the Mecklenburg County Courthouse, and Daniel's mother rocking Grace to sleep on the front porch. "You can still see her," Daniel said evenly. "But this house, this mortgage, this life, that's mine now." Rebecca's face went pale. She hadn't realized how much he'd already documented, how far ahead he'd already moved. She reached for the porch door handle. It didn't turn. The locks had already been changed that morning. "You can't just lock me out of my own house," Rebecca shouted, rattling the door. Daniel stepped outside calmly, Grace asleep against his shoulder, and handed her the manila folder from the porch table. Hotel receipts, bank transfers, printed messages between her and Jason spanning 14 months. "It stopped being your house the day you decided it wasn't your family," he said quietly. Rebecca's hands shook as she flipped through pages she thought she'd deleted, dates she thought she'd hidden. Her mouth opened, but no defense came out. For the first time since the hospital room, she looked genuinely afraid. "I never wanted to hurt you," Rebecca whispered, tears finally falling. "I was just unhappy." Daniel nodded slowly, unsurprised. "You had a right to be unhappy," he said. "You never had a right to lie to me while I held our daughter." He gestured toward the folder in her trembling hands. "The judge will see everything Monday. Jason can help you move your boxes." Rebecca looked past him toward the nursery window, sea-glass green curtains visible from the porch, and understood in that instant exactly what she'd traded away for a man she'd known less than 2 years. Daniel didn't gloat, didn't slam the door, didn't raise his voice even once. He simply looked at her, holding their daughter a little closer. "I didn't cry when you told me, Rebecca," he said, "because heartbreak only breaks you if it catches you by surprise. Mine didn't." He turned back toward the house, Grace stirring softly against his chest. Real love doesn't whisper betrayal into a hospital room. It shows up every single day, especially when it's hard. That line stayed with Rebecca long after the porch light clicked off behind him, longer than any apology she never got the chance to give. 6 months later, the Mecklenburg County Courthouse finalized the divorce, granting Daniel primary custody with Rebecca receiving supervised weekend visits, standard given the documented affair and her unstable living situation with Jason, who'd already grown distant once the drama died down. Daniel kept the house on Willow Creek Lane, repainted the porch himself that spring, and hung a small wooden sign by the door that read, "The Whitfields." Grace took her first steps in the backyard Daniel had fenced in alone, Carol cheering from a lawn chair, phone recording every wobbly second for a daughter who'd never remember losing anything at all. Rebecca's relationship with Jason ended that winter, quietly, the way most things built on someone else's marriage tend to end. She moved into a small apartment off South Tryon Street, picked up extra nursing shifts to afford her lawyer's fees, and saw Grace every other Saturday at a supervised visitation center near Uptown. She sent Daniel a long, apologetic email that spring. He read it once, thanked her for her honesty, and never brought it up again. He wasn't interested in revenge. He'd already gotten what mattered, a safe home, a documented truth, and a daughter who'd grow up knowing exactly what steady love looked like. On Grace's first Thanksgiving, Daniel roasted a turkey in the kitchen where Rebecca once left half-packed boxes, his mother beside him rolling out biscuit dough, laughter filling a house that finally fell whole again. He set an extra plate out of habit, then quietly put it away, choosing peace over old routines. Later, rocking Grace to sleep by the window, he thought back to the hospital room, to the 4 words that once felt like the end of everything. They weren't the end. They were the moment he stopped waiting for a marriage to save itself, and started building a life that didn't need saving at all.